Hey everyone, welcome to the Selective Preparation Power Reading Test number 4. Let's get straight into it. So this first text is a closed passage, and it's called Animals of the Great Barrier Reef. So this whole text is talking about the animals in the Great Barrier Reef. So what kind of animals you find, how many there are, the different species, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so since this is a closed passage text, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 as our blank spaces. And on the next slide, we will have 5 options to choose from for each of these blank spaces. Okay, so at this point, I encourage you guys to pause the video here and have a read of this whole text, just skipping the blank spaces so you get an idea of what it's about. Okay, now these are the options that we have to choose from. And let's get into question 1. So now that you guys have read the whole text, what the next step would be is that you read everything around these blank spaces. So the sentence before and the sentence after the blank space, to get an idea of what that specific blank space is talking about. Okay, so let's do that. Animals of the Great Barrier Reef. An incredible variety of marine animals live on and around the Great Barrier Reef. Then we have our blank space for question 1. Sea turtles breed in great numbers at the Great Barrier Reef than anywhere else in the world. Okay, so that is the information that we have. It's kind of introductory, and it's going to talk about probably the variety of animals that live on and around the Great Barrier Reef. So let's slot in each of these options and see which one works the best now. An incredible variety of marine animals live on and around the Great Barrier Reef. These include boring sponges, worms, mollusks, and sea urchins, as well as snails and sea slugs that eat the coral. Okay, this one sounds really good, so let's keep this in mind. B, an incredible variety of marine animals live. The reef is made up of some 400 species of coral. Well, we're not talking about the reef yet. We're still talking about the animals that are living there. So this one's probably out. C, the wildlife species range from the minute drifting jellyfish to huge predatory sharks. Okay, this is very good as well because it's talking about the different species that live there. So it range from small jellyfish to huge sharks. Keep this in mind as well. And E, sea fans and sea whips, as well as other creatures of the reef, also display brilliant hues of red, yellow, orange, purple, pink, and green. So this is more talking about specifically some sort of creatures that have unique colors. So we're not really talking about the colors of those animals yet. We're just talking about what basic animals there are. So let's take this one out. And now it's between A and C. Okay, so between these two, the better answer would be C because of the next sentence that we have. Okay, so C would be answer because sea turtles breed in greater numbers at the Great Barrier Reef than anywhere else in the world. So this next line is talking about sea turtles. Then the next line is talking about gentle dugongs. Then we're talking about birds. And then we're talking about heron, which are also kind of birds. Okay, so since there's such a wide variety, like turtles, then these dugongs, which are kind of like seals. Then we have birds. Since there's such a wide variety, the best introduction to that wide variety is C. They range from small to big. Okay, so question 1, your best answer is C. Now, on to question 2. So again, we're reading around this blank space. Since this is the first line in the paragraph, we'll have to read after that to get an idea of what this paragraph would be talking about. So, something something. It also supports approximately 200 species of cowrie shell and probably as many as 2,000 species of fish. Okay, so what does the Great Barrier Reef support? Since it says it also supports, that means this first line would have to be saying it supports something something. Okay, or it contains these kinds of organisms. So A wouldn't work because that would work best in the first paragraph. B, the reef is made up of some 400 species of coral. Works quite well because it's talking about the different species that we have, just like in the rest of the paragraph. Just keep this in mind. D, the reef has over 100 islands, many of which are home to many seabirds that inhabit the area. Not so much, we're not talking about birds specifically here. And E, sea fans and sea whips, as well as other creatures. So this one is still about the color. So wherever we see colors and unique appearances, maybe, would be a paragraph where this would fit. But this is not the paragraph where this would fit right now. So best answer would be B for question 2. The reef is made up of some 400 species of coral. It also supports approximately 200 species of cowrie shell and probably as many as 2,000 species of fish. So what different species does the reef support, is what this paragraph is talking about. Now, question 3. Numerous primitive animals burrow into the very coral of the reef itself. Slotting in each of these options. These include boring sponges, worms, mollusks, and sea urchins, as well as snails and sea slugs that eat the coral. Okay, this one works really well because that would include, or it's talking about what animals burrow into the coral. So sponges, worms, sea urchins, snails, slugs, these are all small things that have the ability to burrow or to dig into coral. So this one will most likely be your answer. Let's underline this for now. D, the reef has over 100 islands. Okay, we're not really talking about islands at all. Since this is quite a small paragraph, we're just talking about the animals that burrow into coral. So D is out, and E would be out as well, because this is the one talking about color, so we're still not up to the paragraph. So A would be your answer for question 3. And C has already been ruled out because we've used it in a previous question. Okay, now question 4, the final one for this closed passage. This is on to the second half of the text. So, question 4 is in the middle of this paragraph, so let's read before and after. And what about the coral itself? Much of the coral of the reef is white. This is the skeleton of the dead polyps, which are tiny anemone-like creatures. In contrast, live polyps are typically very bright-colored. Something something. As well as providing a spectacular home to marine life, the colors of the reef act as a way of identifying species, helping species to find a mate. So, we see now that this is kind of the paragraph we've been looking for. The reef is white. The skeletons, in contrast, live polyps are typically very bright colored. And it's talking about the color of the reef and why the color is important. If you remember, option E was talking about the color of different creatures. So let's see if it fits in now. In contrast, live polyps are typically very bright colored. Sea fans and sea whips, as well as other creatures of the reef, also display brilliant hues of red, yellow, orange, purple, pink, and green. As well as providing a spectacular home to marine life, the colors of the reef act as a way of identifying species. Okay, this one works perfectly now. Not only is it introducing the colors, but it's also talking about the other creatures that live in the reef. So this one works perfectly. So D now would be the option that we didn't use for any of the questions, and this would be your extra one. So we won't use this for any of the answers. So the answer for question 4 is E. Okay, now we're on to text 2, which is an excerpt from the book Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. So this is just about a boy and what's happening around this boy, so what he's doing. Okay, so again, pause the video here, read the text, and then we'll move on. So question 5. Question 5 says, what state of mind does the main character seem to be in? So our main character is the boy in this text. What is his state of mind? Which means, how does he feel? Does he feel happy, sad, relaxed, paranoid, content, or depressed? Okay, so what is his state of mind? Just what sort of feeling is he in? And we'll find the answer in the second half of this text over here. He says, I didn't sleep much. I couldn't somehow for thinking. And every time I waked up, I thought somebody had me by the neck. So the sleep didn't do me no good. Okay, he didn't sleep much, which is a sign of being, a little bit nervous. And every time he woke up, he thought somebody had him by the neck. Okay, so he was looking out all the time. So relaxed will definitely be out if he can't sleep. Depressed is more sad. He doesn't seem sad. He seems very nervous and on edge. Content is also a positive word. It means you're satisfied, so which is out. So paranoid would be your best answer. This one means you're looking everywhere. You're scared that someone's coming up on you. Okay, you're always watching your back. So 5B is the best answer here. Paranoid. Now question 6. By the end of the passage, it is almost dawn, noon, evening, or midnight. So we're looking for a time frame. Now the answer will be found over here where it's highlighted. It says the moon was shining, which means it's not noon. So it's either dawn, evening, or midnight. And outside of the shadow, it made it most as light as day. Now the language here is quite colloquial. It's very informal. And it's actually in an American accent as well. So it's an old American accent, which means the words are kind of jumbled. And it sounds a bit like gibberish sometimes. But that's just the way that this writer is speaking and how this character speaks. So the moon was shining, and outside of the shadow, it made it most as light as day. Well, the point we need here is most as light as day, which means it was almost daytime. So this moon is still out, but it's almost day. So the sun is coming out now as well, which means your best answer would be dawn. Okay, so this is in the early morning. Okay, right before the sun rises. So 6, your best answer is A. Now 7, when does the character begin to feel better? So if you read the text, throughout the text he's kind of paranoid like we saw. He's nervous and he doesn't really know what's happening around him. He's kind of frustrated. So when does the character begin to feel better? When he gets down from the tree, when he hears people's voices, when he decides to act rather than avoid things, or when the breeze begins to blow. So your answer is found over here, again in the second half of the text. Let's see what he says. By and by I says to myself, I can't live this way. I'm going to find out who it is that's here on the island with me. I'll find it out or bust. Well, I felt better right off. So we know this is where you find the answer because of this sentence here. Well, I felt better right off, which means straight away he felt better. And he felt better because he decided he's going to find out who it is that's here on the island with him. So he's going to find out what he's so scared of, and he's going to see who is around him. Okay? So that's kind of what he's been worrying about this whole time. So your best answer would be C, when he decides to act rather than avoid things. Okay? He can't live just, fearing for his life all the time. He's got to look around and see what's around him. So 7, your answer is C. Now, this is the final text we're looking at. And this is text number 3. So it's a series of questions with this guy, Gary Thwerk. Okay? So again, pause the video here. It's just a series of questions about this guy who is the creator, or he's the first person who sent the first spam email. So if you have an email account, you probably received a spam email before. And this is the guy that sent the first one. So you guys can thank this guy for finding all those spam emails in your email. Now, reading this text, and we'll move on to the questions. So question 8. In 1978, approximately how many people in the world were online? So we find the answer over here. The question to this person is how many people were on your mailing list. He says over 400, which was about 25% of everyone online in the world at the time. Okay? So he had 400 on his mailing list, and that was 25% of everyone online in the world. Okay? If it's 25% of the total, that means 400 is a quarter of the total, which means 1600 would be full if you times this by 4. Okay, to find the full amount. So 1600 would be your answer, or 1600. Okay, we just have to do 400 times 4 to find 100%. Okay, now even if you don't do the working out, you can see that 100 would be less than 400, which means, well, we're looking for something higher than that because 400 is less. So this would not be an answer. 400 can't be 25% of 400. That doesn't make sense either. And a million would be way too high. Okay, so just by kind of crossing out the wrong answers, you can also get C that way. Now, question 9. How does Gary feel about his involvement in spam mail? Is he unconcerned about his involvement? Is he proud? Does he feel guilty, or does he feel embarrassed? Let's see how he feels. So the question is, does anybody ever blame you for the current volumes of spam today? He says, oh yes, I get people who blame me, but if I talk to them, we normally end up smiling or laughing about it. Okay, so if he laughs and smiles about how he feels, then he probably doesn't feel guilty, he probably doesn't feel embarrassed. It's probably unconcerned or proud. Okay, because he doesn't really take it too seriously. Then we know for sure, based on this next question. He says, or the interviewer says, do you feel guilty? He says, no, of course not. Okay, that's really all you need. So can't be embarrassed, can't be guilty, and he's not proud of it either. So your best answer would be unconcerned. Okay, he doesn't really care about how other people think of him. Okay, he's okay with it. It doesn't really affect him. So that's question 9. Now, that was the final question for this test as well. So just some key points to take away from this test are the usual ones with closed passage questions, which is the method to do it. 1 is read the text in its entirety, which means fully. 2 is to read all the answers that you have. And 3 is to go back to the text and start filling in the answers in order from the top. So trying in each option with each blank space. Now, another key point to take away is that using first-person perspective, which is using words such as I, me, or we, can allow you to go deeper into your character's feelings. Okay, now where we saw this was in the Huckleberry Finn text, which was this one. For example, the narrator says, I didn't sleep much, I couldn't somehow for thinking. This whole text is in first person because he uses the word I to describe himself, which helps the reader or helps the writer go very detailed into the character's emotions. Okay, so that's one thing that you might be able to do in your own texts. And now I finish with this text.